Hello there, good evening. Normally, we like to start this show off with a relatively light-hearted introduction. But tonight, in light of recent events and the continued racial prejudice out in the States and worldwide, and the resulting protests and demonstrations, we've opted for something slightly different. Because while this may sound political, in reality, it is anything but. This is a societal issue. And with football being a global, influential sport and platform, it really does feel like it matters even more right now, whether that be an individual role model or a collective movement for the better. And that's what tonight is all about. It's about educating that little bit more. It's about learning that little bit more. And it's about understanding that little bit more. So hopefully, many of us can become better people, and society as a result can become more knowledgeable, tolerant, and most importantly, equal. I'm Andy Sixsmith. This is Football Matters. Welcome to the show. Coronavirus may be a new pandemic on the block, but tonight we debate a pandemic that's existed for centuries. Racism once again to the fore globally and permeating into the world of football with key players speaking out. We'll be chatting with Show Racism the Red Card's Grebby to see how big a role the sport can play in defeating the prejudicial disease. All change at Hartlepool, one chief executive out, another one swiftly in. But what does this mean for the club, the next steps, and its direction moving forward? We'll be putting all of those questions and more to the Hartlepool Mail's Dominic Scurr. And terrific totals, heaven helping, and from Whitley to Whitby. All those alliterations and more feature as we round up the very best and the rest of the news from a world of North East football. So, welcome along to this week's programme, and in a week where La Liga is returning out in Spain and rumours swirled that Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich splashed out a cool £120 million on some fine art. Wrongly, we have to say they were wrong rumours. We do say hola amigos to our three own artists of punditry here on Football Matters. I'm going to try and keep a straight face here. Firstly, always leaving a distinct impression, much like his French compatriot Monet, it's former Newcastle United defender Olivier Bernard. Next, following in the footsteps of William Blake when it comes to romanticism, the only difference being his is a love for a pint rather than a palate, former Sunderland defender Darren Williams. And last, but certainly by no means least, our very own Van Gogh, who might well lob my ear off if I make any more jokes about his height. North East football writer Mark Carruthers. Quick disclaimer, I didn't write a single word of that. Well done, producer Johnny, and your art knowledge. I wouldn't have had a clue about any of that otherwise. So congratulations to Johnny on showing us that he's a little bit more than an Andy Carroll lookalike currently.
Was the worst intro yet.
You heard him, Johnny. That's the one and only time you're writing the intro for the pundits. Sorry about that. Gents, how are we all? We all good?
Yeah. Not too bad.
Excellent. Well, an artistic intro this week, and this Abramovich story. Have we seen it? Because this is the painting that he was rumoured to have bought for £120 million. I think it might be in euros. It is the Scream painting by Munch. Is it? Maybe.
It is.
Looks lovely. Wasn't the case, but it did get us thinking. For all of you, what lavish outlay have you made, and then thought, what the heck have I just done? What on earth have I just done? Think about it. What lavish outlay?
Fairly easy.
Olly, I'm coming to you first.
I think it'll have to be Durham City Football Club. But for the simple reason is that at first I came in with somebody, I won't mention his name. He came to me saying, there's a club for sale. You'll be very interested. There's between 50 grand and 100 grand. Someone else wants to put in. We just want to use your name and do that. And, why not being a manager at some point? So I went, okay, fair enough. And I did. 2 weeks later, it was on the run. I was left with a club to manage on my own. So I had to pull a lot of people, supporters, who became now board members. So that's how I got the club. through lies and quite awkward.
Mark, Darren, top that. That's a strong opening story.
Apart from the ex-wife.
Getting there. Wasn't bad.
I don't really have any lavish outlays, to be quite honest, I don't think.
Wait until you invest in Olly's pub.
He's going to drain the thing.
So, Mark, apart from ex-wives, football clubs, and investment in pubs, any lavish outlay that you've made and thought?
I'd probably have to go with Darren's first answer, to be honest, and just move on. So.
Well, at least Olly told us a story about his. I'm still waiting on yours too. Maybe after the recording happens, we can get back to that, I think. But brilliant. The other good news, of course, this week, beer gardens rumoured to be reopening later on this month. I'm sure we're all delighted about that for various reasons.
Mine's never closed, really, to be honest.
I feel I've got my own in the back garden anyway. So
Okay, Olly will be delighted from it. From a business perspective, you'll be sorted, Olly, won't you, up in Blythe? No?
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that again.
Should we move on? Okay, no worries, mate. The other bit of news...
It's been a really awkward start to the show, hasn't
it? I tell you what, it's all started from a punditry introduction. Johnny's got a lot to answer for, our producer. He's set the tone for the show now.
Johnny certainly does have a lot to answer for. You're all right.
He does. But the other bit of news, more pressingly, have you heard this, that the crowd noises are going to be piped in for Sky? They've basically set a deal with EA Sports. So they've got the crowd noises that FIFA or EA Sports have recorded. And now Sky viewers are going to have, and I'm sure BT will as well, have an option to listen to the crowd. And the interesting quote that I've heard is, apparently they've been doing this for years for stadiums that have little to no atmosphere already. What stadiums immediately spring to mind for you guys across the English football leagues?
Old Trafford.
Old Trafford,
yeah,
Mark?
Agree.
Yeah? Darren?
Yeah, Old Trafford doesn't really have much of an atmosphere, does it, to be quite honest? For the size of the club and the fan base, it doesn't have that atmosphere, mate. Mark's spot on there, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a posh crowd in Manchester United, you're right.
Yeah. I can't believe that we've got through that entire question without Olly saying Sunderland and Darren saying St James's. I'm amazed, to be honest.
No, yeah. I thought you mentioned Premier League. Sorry.
Just like that, it's done.
I thought you mentioned big club.
Shall we move on? Yes. On a more serious note, before we do get into the show, for everyone who tuned in last week and watched our episodes that quickly and rightfully became about mental health, Nick Gray, Morpeth Town manager, coming on and talking bravely and courageously about his experiences with mental health during the lockdown. You three, of course, talking wonderfully well about your own individual experiences with mental health problems over the years. So many people, and the reaction to us on social media over the past 7 days has been tremendous. I've seen people publicly put messages out asking for help. I've seen people, quietly and privately ask for help. Absolutely wonderful. It's not to give ourselves a pat on the back. All we do is just relay the message. But tremendous to see so many people come out and ask for help and talk about their issues, because like we said last week, talking helps every single time. So good on you if you have done that. And of course, if you are just watching this and catching up with us on podcasts or on video, if you want to talk about any troubles that you're going through, be our guest. We're on social media, of course, on Twitter and Facebook, or Twitter and Instagram, rather, at Footy Matters TV. And you can watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/Football Matters. And we are also in podcast version at the minute too, available as a podcast on SoundCloud or iTunes, if that tickles your fancy. Let's get into the show then. Honestly, in 2020, it pains me that we are talking about this, but we want to talk about it. We have to talk about it. 2 weeks ago, very few people had heard of George Floyd. 46-year-old man, a father, a son. As you'll probably have seen, unless you've lived in a cave or something, he died when a police officer knelt on his neck for 8 minutes as he told them that he couldn't breathe. His death has sparked protests, demonstrations, firstly across the US, now globally, with the Black Lives Matter slogan prevalent throughout the world. and footballers such as Tyrone Mings, Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford, Newcastle United's DeAndre Yedlin, firstly, Alan Saint-Maximin today, have all spoken out strongly in support of the protests and the Black Lives Matter campaign. And here at Football Matters, it goes without saying that we are no different. Olly, before we discuss the football side of things, and before we introduce our first guest, who you know very, very well, of course, how stunning is it that this inequality, that this, Raheem Sterling used the word, and I'm going to use it as well, this disease is so prevalent still in 2020?
It's, I think, you know, the fact that another black person died, I think showed how, you know, black people have had enough. I think it's been going on for far too long, far too much. And you know what's really painful to hear or to see on social media is a lot of people, you know, mistaking you know, all Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter.
Yeah. And
what people don't understand is that what we're saying is not that, you know, white life don't matter or anybody don't matter. Mm-hmm. At this present time, there is a black man who got murdered. You know, we can't use another word because he has been murdered. And over the last decade, you know, slavery to start with, you know, black people have been persecuted for years. But I think it's time to stand up. It's time to make it known that it's not acceptable. Yeah. And that's why, you know, I want to make sure people understand that, you know, Black Lives Matter is not against white people. It's not against anybody. It's that, you know, black people are asking for, you know, for civil rights, not equal rights, but civil rights. That's the minimum we should have. We want to be equal. We'll never be equal, but we want, you know, civil rights. That's all we need and we deserve.
And it's asking as well for education, understanding and learning as well. It's not just about saying that I'm not racist or, you know, I'm anti-racist. It's learning about the heritage. It's learning about the truth. It's educating yourself.
Exactly. Because you know, once again, you know, looking at the social media, you know, you have people commenting on various things, trying to explain other you know, fact that happened, and forgetting the point, you know, and that's what's frustrating. People need to understand that, you know, there's ignorance, but if you are ignorant, don't, you know, sometimes think about what you say or the way you think. You know, it's better to ask question than to have an opinion on something you don't control. Because you know, it can, you know, I spent my last week to try and educate people on social media, but I don't want to do that. You know, I've got other things to do. But in the end of the day, you try to make your own friends, not people you don't know. Is your own friends have little comments that, you know, that comes out, and you just like, you can't let it go. You've got to kind of challenge it in a good way because they're your friends, and you know they don't mean harm. Sure. But it's quite painful to hear that comments coming from your close friends as well. So it has been a battle for the week, and I said I've deleted a few, you know, on my social media just for their post. Because I can't spend my life answering to people.
No, rightly not. I mean, we'll come on to excuse me. We'll come on to all three of your experiences with regards to this, but I'm delighted to welcome kind of our first guest onto the program and try and bring everything towards football, because after all, we are a football program, and you know, racism is as prevalent in football as it is any other area of society. So Olly, obviously this is a man that you know very, very well. I'm delighted to welcome onto Football Matters for the very, very first time, it has to be said as well, the chief executive of Show Racism the Red Card, Jed Grebby. Jed, first and foremost, can you hear us? Can you see us?
I can hear you and I can see you.
Excellent. Good man. Thank you very, very much for appearing on the programme tonight. Really appreciate it, because, you know, the events, of course, of the last 2 weeks in particular, I'm sure, You've been very, very busy. You've almost been inundated over the last couple of weeks. Like I say, a trying fortnight sadly reveals the problems 400 years ago still exist now in 2020. Before we get into the football, how sad are you that this is still a huge societal issue right now?
Well, sure, it's my card work in schools on a daily basis, or we did before this virus hit the UK and the world. So we're very much aware that racism's on the rise. So this particular example was a brutal one. Obviously, the murder of George Floyd and the way he was murdered in America. But I think it's 2 black men die at the hands of the police every week in America. So none of these things are new. But I think the one positive out of this is the worldwide reaction of Black Lives Matter, I live in Whitley Bay, and there was a demonstration here, just down the road. So it's hit everywhere, hasn't it? I mean, there's been a really positive response to it by young people in particular, wanting to make sure that their voices are heard on this issue, and it's led to a big anti-racism backlash. So sure, it's right card will welcome that. Is
it almost frustrating though that it needed another death? Use the word there, brutal death like that of George Floyd's to spark this further protest, to spark what we hope will be further education and action with regards to this issue, or not?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there has to be a murder of somebody in this way to spark this kind of reaction. That is absolutely shocking. But I mean, we're living in very dangerous times. I mean, I think Donald Trump is one of the most dangerous politicians since Adolf Hitler. I mean, he seems to be, way around the virus, and the idea of his advice on the virus was just mind blowing. But now, he's pandering to the far right, and he has around him, people who in Brannan and people like that are very, very dangerous far right, extreme right Nazis, and he seems to be, because he's got an election in November, playing up to the worst aspects of racism in the United States, and he seems to want a civil war. If you look at it, I mean, he's absolutely barking mad.
It's crazy times over there, and of course, it's many issues in the US, but of course, issues right the way across the globe, really, when it comes down to racism. Let's focus on the football. Just set the scene for us as it stands at the moment. How big a rise or fall or change in any way have we seen in racism in football over the last, let's say, between 10 and 20 years?
See, I don't think football's where you're seeing the actual manifestation. It's certainly not at professional level. So obviously you see the grassroots level, because that's much more reflective of society. But sure, it's like Cardiff always made the point. We were formed in '96.
Yeah.
By Shaka Hislop in that particular Newcastle team, when Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough teams. Yeah. By that stage, the job of fighting racism in football had been almost done, because the fans organisations, Geordies Are Black and White, which I was involved in, and players themselves making a stand. Not one or two, but hundreds of players making a stand, black and white players, against racism. So I don't think football is where you see the worst excesses of racism. I think what you've seen is that players are actually willing to come into and speak about it, and I think that's been brilliant in the last year, I would say. The England team in particular. I don't think it's any surprise that Gareth Southgate's been, in my opinion, behind that. I know Raheem Sterling's had a lot of credit for it, and good on him. His Twitter account was really good. Yeah. But Gareth Southgate's been a peer, I'm sure, some red card for many, many years. When he was a player at Middlesbrough, he joined the campaign. Very thoughtful, mature, and I think a real leader. And I think he's led by example. And I think he knew what was going to happen in those European games, and where the racism was horrendous. Because in some countries in Eastern Europe, and also in Italy, in Italy and in Spain as well. I mean, Italy and Spain are not where we are. I think where we are in football now is that you're less likely to get racism inside St James's Park or the Stadium of Light or any professional ground than you are on the metro, on the trains, and walking in the street. I did an interview with a black nurse today, and we're doing a film at the moment on challenging racism in the NHS.
Right.
Horrendous. She's a refugee. Wears the hijab. Told me she lives in Sunderland. People throwing bottles at her. And she said she's had to take the headscarf off because she's with the headscarf on. She's much more a target.
Yeah.
So she's having to do something our own religion tells her not to do just to keep herself safe. Yeah. So that's where the problems are.
It's crazy in itself. But, we can't be blind to the fact that whatever level of the game that there is still flare-ups of racism when it comes down to football as well. In general, what have you found the attitudes of, we've talked individuals and we will come on to the likes of Raheem and Tyrone Mings and Marcus Rashford in a little bit, but what have you found is the attitude of the clubs and the league organisations towards racism as we're in 2020 now? Does it vary, or are they relatively unified in their words and actions?
Sure, my card would say that most of the clubs have been on, and we obviously, without the clubs, we would not have got the campaign started. We started with the football players and fans, but if the clubs wouldn't give us access to the grounds in particular, and that, the most exciting thing we do is get young people and footballers together. Well, we used to before COVID-19 inside the football stadiums to talk about racism in a school environment, an educational environment. Yeah. So the clubs have to be on board. I would say though that there has been a period, if you look at the last 25 years, the first 15 where Sheriff's Red Card were involved, it was easy to get players involved.
Yeah. When
the formation of the Premier League and players becoming more and more superstars, if you want, but basically they all have agents. Agents have been a barrier for our organisation because agents want money, and ultimately agents want to protect their client, as they would put it. Yeah. So it's been harder and harder to get the top players involved in the campaign. That's why Gareth Southgate in particular has been a breath of fresh air in England. So, but there's been barriers along the way.
Is that why it's so refreshing then to see the likes of Raheem Sterling, one of the top players now in England, actually come out voluntarily and decide to do exclusive interviews with Newsnight, I think it was, to talk openly on his social media, but then to see the likes of Tyrone Mings, he was at a demonstration the other day, Courtney Sweetman-Kirk on the women's side, Marcus Rashford, DeAndre Yedlin today, and Alan Saint-Maximin too. How refreshing is it to actually see these players bypass the barrier of agents and decide to talk about it there?
Yeah, brilliant. I couldn't believe seeing Mings on the demonstration in Birmingham. Yeah. No doubt he would have got a bollocking for it because, obviously staying safe and what have you. But I think he just said, I wanted to make a stand, and absolutely brilliant to see players do that. I think the one I'd like to highlight is Colin Kaepernick, though, because, if you look at what he put on the line, we've just done an interview with Shaka. Shaka's doing quite a lot at the moment because he's stuck in his house in Boston. And he went on the demonstration, actually, in Boston with his wife and daughter last Sunday. Not this Sunday, but the Sunday before. But generally speaking, he talks about Colin because he's put his career on the line. He's never played again.
Yeah.
Yet, look at the impact that one person's made. They're taking the knee now. I thought it was brilliant what Liverpool did. I'm not sure all these other clubs would have done it in the fashion they did. Whenever we do anything with Liverpool, I think it's Klopp, in my opinion, but you don't know. We deal with a lot of different football clubs, but sometimes you see things. We do a football club poster, which the young people love, and we've done them for 25 years. Yeah. But Liverpool started changing the design of them and doing them much more interesting stuff. Yeah. And I think, again, the taking of the knee, absolutely fantastic. With Colin Kaepernick, that's gesture and what, the abuse he's had to put up with from the President of the United States.
Height, yeah.
And then right through as well, for teammates, he was vilified for it. One of the things that, we've got to be quite clear on is, he wasn't a hero, but when he did it, he was absolutely vilified and he stood out. And I think he's now being shown through this movement, Black Lives Matter, but to be absolutely correct.
I think it's incredible with the Kaepernick story as well. It's taken so long for the NFL to kind of turn themselves around on it. And, you know, an organisation that cast Kaepernick out almost, and now have turned around with the Black Lives Matter campaign and said, actually, you know what, Colin Kaepernick had a point, and thank God that he's actually been proven right on it. Just come back to the football a second though, Jed. We've talked the black players. How much responsibility do the white players have, do you think? Would it be an incredibly strong message coming from the white players that they're standing alongside the likes of Raheem, Tyrone, you know, DeAndre Yedlin, etc., in standing against racism in football and in society?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the ethos of our campaign was always to get the black players to talk about racism and the white players together. So the panels we do, they're very rarely an all-black panel. It would all, I mean, the first ever panel we had was Shaka and John Beresford. And I remember it vividly because Bez actually admitted to being a teenage racist.
Right.
Sheffield United fan, doing monkey chants. And John Beresford has admitted on numerous occasions he's having a dad who didn't like black people coming into the house, particularly didn't want black people dating his daughter, who's obviously Bez's sister. Yeah. So, you know, people like that talking about, you know, he told us in the first ever event he'd been telling jokes and no racist jokes, and he hadn't realised how hurtful they were until he talked to Shaka afterwards. So definitely, I mean, racism obviously is aimed at black people, but ultimately the ideas of it, you know, are aimed at white people. I mean, you just got to look at what Tommy Robertson is doing at the moment around this, you know, at the weekend. Yeah. You know, trying to get people to blame the Black Lives Matter for the spread of the virus and all this kind of nonsense.
Less airtime on that man, the better, eh?
Yeah.
Just last one on the players specifically. I know, you know, the fact that we've talked about Raheem and Tyrone, and I'm sure there's plenty of other players out there as well. How much responsibility can the players take before, you know, it's limited almost, and someone else and a huge organisation has to step even further behind them? Because at the minute they're going out on a limb and doing these things, they're turning up at demonstrations, talking on social media, there has to be a huge amount of support surely from bigger organisations, doesn't there, rather than just the players individually?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what Juris and Ricardo are calling for out of this whole thing is anti-racism on the national curriculum. We've been calling for that since Tony Blair was in government, back in '97 when we produced our first films. Yeah. Because, you know, ultimately teachers have to have the space to talk about the issues. We know how big racism is.
Yeah.
And our films are incredibly popular in terms of opening young people's eyes to the issues of racism and the way to talk about it. So getting those conversations in the classroom, but also teachers having the training as well to deal with racism, and be able to do that is a key part of what we're calling for. That's what, you know, where we see this going, and hopefully we'll have an impact on our government, because, you know, ultimately it can't end with just football being or any sport. I mean, what's great about this is if you look at social media in particular, it's, you know, everybody's coming out and talking about the issues. You know, James Corden's done a really brilliant tweet today. I'm not a big fan, but he's done an excellent tweet on the demonstration in Bristol. Because there's a lot of people trying to say they're vandals and hooligans, but ripping down a statue of somebody who made their money from slavery, 19,000 people killed, apparently in his boats alone. I think, you know.
I suppose that's where the education and learning comes into it, though, isn't it? Because that's what is being called for at the minute. It's not a case of stand with us and, you know, fight against racism because you don't know what you're fighting against. It's a case of educating people and those people learning. Because I'm the first person to admit, you know, I'm completely anti-racist, but am I educated fully? No. Am I learned? Certainly not. So very much this campaign, the Black Lives Matter campaign, is aimed at people like myself and trying to educate me more. So how do you kind of go about that in terms of educating more people? First of all, the younger generation.
So we've always found films really good, but then obviously we've got an education team at Tourism Record, Olivia Bernard, with us, and Olly.
Thanks, Jeff.
Fantastic role.
Thank you.
It's taken 10 minutes for a name drop, mind, Olly. I don't know.
So having the ex-pros like Olivia involved is really impactful as well. He'll tell you the personal experiences and talking to young people, and having a rapport with young people. In some of the schools we go into, I mean, Gary Bennett tells the story of going into schools in Durham, where people are literally stopping and standing and looking at them because they haven't seen black people. I mean, it's quite exceptional, I have to say. Some of these schools, because we are, even the Northeast now, is much more mixed than it was back in the 70s and 80s. But the impact of personal experience, we're talking to people, and ultimately, racism's always been about it's about setting people against each other, and the best of humankind will know that when you're negative, when you're having a go, when you're hateful, it's not good for you. It's not good for your mental health to be constantly hating somebody, and bullies, and so the schools do a lot of education work generally around bullying, but we particularly focus on the issue of how racism can divide communities, and I think that's something that's around immigration in the Northeast, and also asylum seekers and refugees. Then it's been a big issue over the last 10 years, and then Islamophobia now as well is huge.
Just a couple of final ones. That's the younger generation. Is the older generation a lost cause, do you think, or not?
Absolutely not. I mean, I might even be considered part of the older generation now. Yeah.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not falling into that trap at all.
I really think that the best way we can change attitude is amongst young people, because then they can have an impact on their parents and their grandparents. Because, I think, ultimately, anybody who looks at the world will know, for example, in the current crisis, we're doing, as I said, a film on the NHS.
Yeah.
The NHS is run by immigrants. Our services, my daughter works in a care home. The care home industry would not exist in this country if it wasn't for immigrants at the moment.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if people are saying, and they are saying bad things about Muslims and about immigrants, we've got to get young people thinking about what that means. What kind of world do they want? Do they want a Donald Trump world of building walls, of building barriers for people, of making sure you can't go to the States, of making sure or do they want a world where we learn from other cultures, where you travel the world? And ultimately, I've got faith in young people and older people that I mentioned Trump being as bad as Hitler. Well, on the one hand, as an individual he might be, but he doesn't have the power of the fascists in the past. So we've had relatively good times in Europe and the world.
Yeah.
The Second World War. We want to keep it that way. We don't want the fascists and the far right coming to power.
Sure. Just to round things off, I know we've talked about Shaka already, but I was listening to an interview and seeing the statement, of course, that he released as honorary president. And he said, one quote really stuck out for me. He said, "This is a political issue to be confronted, not a political football to be passed around." As a whole, what can yourselves, players, clubs, organisations, supporters do and take this the right way to ensure this noise surrounding racism at the moment, the Black Lives Matter campaign, following the death, incited by the death of George Floyd, it doesn't die down and it's used correctly in the long term rather than this just lasting for a couple of weeks and then the embers dying down?
Well, I think the big change this time, I listened to a few of the American civil rights. I think the American civil rights movement's always inspired me. People like Muhammad Ali and Martin Luther King, and so those people. If you listen to those people, then the young generation involved now, I think, from this, and the fact it's black and white young people. I mean, CNN have tried to portray the issues in America as race riots. But they're fundamentally not, because it's black and white young people who've come together. And I think one of the big changes that we've seen, Chris Kamara is another one of our patrons who did one of the Good Morning Britain or whatever it was the other day, and he said this is a seminal moment this is. I mean, the Black Lives movement is not going to go backwards from this. No. Now, it may not stay at the pitch we're at now, but I think the fact that young people have got involved. I mean, as I say, I'm living a few miles away from the Spanish city, and I didn't know there was a big demonstration. I looked at it on television. Yeah, and it was all young people, and it was great to see young people speaking far more eloquently than I can about race and their own experience. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic to see. And I did an interview just finally with a Telegraph journalist. Yeah. Not my favourite paper, the Tory Graph, but she actually said she'd had a show some red card workshop as a kid. Now it made me feel old because she was a 35-year-old journalist, but it also made me feel proud because we'd had an impact on her. Yeah. That's why she came to us. And I tell you what, I've never known as many people contact the organisation. We're just inundated with fundraising campaigns at the moment, which is great because people remember us and they remember we've had an impact. And we've had some tough times, like any charity, we've had governments that haven't supported us, and we've had tough times. But I think we're just one of the recipients that'll make sure this has a longer term impact.
And long may it continue, Jed, because this is a long haul at the end of the day, isn't it? It's not a short-term affair. It's been going on for 400 odd years, and I'm sure there's a long way to go yet. But organisations like Show Races and the Red Card, people like yourself, and the people who are benefiting from Show Races and the Red Card, we are getting there ever so slowly, aren't we? So it's tremendous to see. Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight, Jed. Really appreciate it, and hopefully, like I say, in the short term, we can continue to make some changes.
Great. And Olivier Bernard is great, by the way.
How much did Olly pay you to say that, Jed?
Thanks, Jed.
He knows I love him. He knows I love him.
I love you dearly.
Cheers, Obi.
Don't make me cry, Jed. Don't make me cry.
Take care of yourself, Jed. Thank you very much.
Cheers, now.
Cheers, Jed. See you later. That's Jed Grebby, of course, Chief Executive of Show Races and Red Card. Olly, I have to come back to you on this before we talk between all of us. What experiences, bringing it back to football, have you had? Personally been subjected to, or witnessed a teammate being subjected to?
Listen, I've got a few while I was playing, more since I've retired. The worst one is going in a room. I'm not going to mention any place because I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. But going in a room where I felt like straight away I shouldn't be there. So it goes quiet. And all of a sudden there's one person saying, "Oh, I think it's Olivier. Is that Olly Bernard?" "Yes, it is." "Oh," and then noise start again. Everybody's like, "Oh, how you doing?" Do you know what I mean? "Oh, it's just him." Before half a second, I felt like another black person entering in the wrong place, really. And that's a feeling that a lot of black people can feel on the daily basis. You don't have to say words. You don't have to. But it's just an atmosphere that goes to really show how you can be treated or ignored.
And I suppose that, of course, makes your work with Show Races and Red Card even more valued at the end of the day. You're constantly being subjected to, well, not constantly necessarily, but you have been subjected to it. And, you can use those experiences for good and for having people come through the organisation.
That's the idea. That's the idea. That's why we take our time as exposed to go into school and talk to the young people. And I like the question you've asked about, can we change attitude, adult attitude?
Yeah.
And I'll probably say no, because everybody unfortunately have experience, good or bad, with whether you're black, white, Asian. You've got your experience. It's a lot harder to change somebody who had bad experience with a certain people than where you've got fresh heads. Kids are just playing with each other at the minute, and it is the good time to tell them what's out there, rather than them finding out and asking questions to the wrong people. Let's say your parents, for example, who don't really like a community, and they'll say then don't get near them. And the kids will do it because they have to, but they don't understand it.
Yeah.
stick to mind. And that's what we want to avoid. You know, we want to challenge opinion and make sure, you know, young people can learn from them. So when it's happening, they know how to react, they know what to do, they know how to support.
So that's kind of your experience. Darren, Mark, you know, Darren from a playing perspective, Mark from covering football, you know, for various different outlets over the years. How much have you experienced firsthand?
I mean, obviously I've experienced through football, you know, with obviously teammates and stuff, you know, which isn't, you know, we all know it's wrong and it's not right. And it probably to be fair, I've had most of my squabbles and most of my fights probably over situations like that, you know, because I feel it's right. And I think, you know, people are, you know, wrong in doing so. You know, obviously what's happened in the world is absolutely shocking, you know, and what's gone on. But, you know, we're right. People need educating on this. And I agree, it's got to be from a young age. You know, it's got to be instilled from a young age, because I think, you know, I've been in situations, I've been in rooms, I've been in places where, you know, I'm sat with a group of people, you know, and even somebody maybe as I know will say something. I'll just leave. I'll just walk out, because I don't agree with it. And rather than get in a fight and have a situation like that, just walk away from these people and not have anything to do with them really, because you know, that's my beliefs and that's how I am. And you know, I don't agree. And you know, we all should get on. You know, there's no difference in anybody at the end of the day. You know, and I've always been the same. And if anybody in my my company, you know, happens to step out of line, then you know, they're out of my company. Simple as that.
Yeah. So has there been specific example, like with you at clubs, where you talk squabbles and arguments that you've had as a result, where you've witnessed something and you've spoken your mind, you've said, look, hang on a minute, that's not on. We don't go. Has there been specific examples of that?
Not from a club point of view. You know, there's not been within, you know, a team that's spoken out of line and said anything like that. Just, you know, in general company, you know, I might be out with a group of friends, you know, person might have an opinion about something, you know, and unfortunately, you know, I either end up having a scrap with him or I end up walking away from him. Simple as that. You know, because, you know, it's just wrong. You know, it's so wrong. And like you say, the educational side of things needs to start early now, because I think not all the older generation, but a lot of the older generation are stuck in their ways, you know, and they have their ways and their beliefs, and that's how they see things. You know, it's totally wrong, but you know, my beliefs are completely different.
And it is refreshing to see the younger generation, like Jed said, like Olly said, and like you've just said, Darren, you know, kind of being receptive to that, and they're appearing on these demonstrations, these protests. They're the ones at the forefront, and you know, it gives you a little bit of hope for the future. Mark, just to round things up before we come back to Olly, have you kind of experienced much from, you know, a press perspective, or?
Well, I think first and foremost, everyone here was a football fan before they got involved in different aspects of the game. And I remember first going to games where I was told stories of the National Front giving leaflets out at games, and you know, where the abuse of black players was prevalent and happened, you know, game in, game out. I still remember when Andy Cole signed for Newcastle, it was seen as a big deal that they were signing a black striker that was going to wear the number 9 shirt. It's you know, we shouldn't hide away from the fact that we have come a long way since back then.
Yeah.
But as a society, I do feel as if we're at a moment of change now, and everyone has a responsibility, whether that's the media, whether that's celebrities, whether that's politicians. What I do feel, and we've spoken about it a lot, that the youth, you know, the next generation do seem to be inspired by people like Raheem Sterling's and Marcus Rashford's, rather than certain politicians or figures who feed the far right and feed this racist agenda. So I think we are looking at being in a moment of change, and hopefully that won't just finish with this. It will continue. You know, the next generation will be educated properly about what's right and what's wrong, and we can kind of move on from having this. Have I seen it at games? Absolutely. Yeah, I've covered games when there's been accusations. I've been at games when you can hear it. One that Olly played in San Siro, I still remember noises that were made. You know, but what's happening now has to be built upon. It can't just be, you know, a 2-3 week thing like you said, Andy. It has to be something that we learn from, that we educate people on, and that we move on.
So that was really well said, that, Mark. actually. And it kind of, I was going to have my own point, but you've basically just encapsulated everything I feel. So I think it's only fair to kind of let Olly have the final word on this before we move on to our next story at Hartlepool. Olly, simple question. How much hope do you have? Bearing in mind what you've seen in the last fortnight, how much hope do you have for the short and the long term in this fight against racism?
I've got a lot more, and I'm a lot more enthusiastic now that, you know, it comes to a death of a black man, for everybody to react at the same time. And you know, we tend to forget there's not only black people marching and doing the streets. So it's quite important. It's a good time, I think, to reflect and probably act.
Yeah.
To make this world a better place. You know, for the older generation, we've got another 10, 20 years, and then you leave your kids behind to do their best their best in life. You know, the idea is to equip everybody with equal knowledge to be able to eradicate this you know, pandemic again.
Yeah. Well, we hope, like I said to Jed, hopefully in the short term and long term, that is very much the case, and we ride the crest of the wave almost of the last couple of weeks and see where this thing takes us. But thank you very much, gents, for speaking so candidly and openly about that. We have to move on to our next story, you know, because we are amazingly, weirdly running out of time already. And the next story regards Hartlepool and the National League. Like many other clubs up and down the country, they're in a precarious position right now. Several staff let go last week, among them their excellent media manager Mark Simpson, chief executive Mark Maguire, and it hasn't taken long for a replacement to come in. Former Darlington chief executive Mark Esper, the man in through the doors as acting chief executive, and Darren's so excited he's dropped his phone. Eyes in the back of your head, mate. Eyes in the back of your head.
I was trying to say me Budweiser.
I'd choose the beer over the show as well, mate. Trust me, I'm with you on that one. I'm delighted to welcome our second guest onto the show this evening. He works for the Hartlepool Mail, amongst other papers as well, amongst other publications, and he is Dominic Scurr, who should be able to hear and see us at the moment. We can't see him. I wonder if we can hear him. Dom, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello, mate. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Right.
Wonder if you could hang on a minute. Let's see what we can do here, because we're struggling otherwise. We had this the other week as well. Let's have a look.
Yep.
Give that a go. See whether that works or not. I mean, at least we can talk to you, even if we don't have to see you.
It's probably for the best, to be fair.
Well, I'll tell you what, mate. If the video pops back in, brilliant. If not, at least we've got your voice and your expert opinion. Let's come on to Hartlepool and let's dive straight into it, because events there will be keeping you relatively busy over the last week or so, won't they?
Yeah. I mean, it was fairly quiet for quite a long period. And then pretty much, as you say, this time last week, things started hotting up. Mark Maguire, obviously, chief executive, left after 2 years. And then 2 days later, shortly after that, his replacement, in effect, was appointed Martin Jesper, who has previous experience in North East football with
Yes.
Darlington. So it has been sort of the past, as you say, 7 days has been fairly busy.
Well, just talking through the departures, and we won't dwell on them, I promise, because, you know, it's history, it's past tense, but what were the reasoning behind those departures? Financial, surely, was that the sole reason or not?
I'd say the main reason is financial, as you say. Like, the club simply couldn't afford to keep certain people on, and
yeah,
that's just the way it is. I wouldn't say it's football, but it is in a way. It's this general sort of coronavirus impact and the situation surrounding that. But with Maguire's departure, I think there's maybe more to that than meets the eye than purely financial. But I wouldn't want to speculate at this stage. But I'm sure we'll find out sooner or later, and we'll just have to see what happens in the future.
I'll tell you what, we won't speculate about his departure, but we will talk about the new arrival in Martin Jesper. I know you've said there, and we mentioned it before, you know, former Darlington. He's come from Hearts. Give us a bit more background on this bloke, what you found out about him, what he's good at, what he can do for pools.
Obviously, he's a chartered accountant, so that brings with it its own benefits when a club are going through the sort of financial difficulties they currently are. CEO at Darlington, after they went into administration and were demoted into the Northern League, spent 3 years there, and generally, from what I gather, is fairly highly regarded there following his departure. Hearts, he was head of strategic development, I think it was that, which is basically he was engaging with fan groups and supporters trust and foundations and stuff like that, and try to get them more involved with the club, which was sort of Hearts' view to try and make a step into fan ownership. I don't think they did end up going down that route, but that was sort of the aim of him being there. So I think his role at Pools will sort of be of a similar ilk to that, trying to get the fans more involved, try and get stakeholders, people like that more engaged and bring money into the club, more or less.
He is, the big word that sticks out for me is acting. He's acting chief executive.
Yes.
What does that tell us? How much insight does that give us about the current situation at the club, that this isn't a permanent appointment right now?
Well, it's just, as with everything at the moment, it's just so uncertain. Pools don't know where they're going to be a few months down the line. They don't know where they're going to be this time next year. So I guess it sort of makes sense to put someone acting, I'm using quotation marks, you can't see, but acting executive director as a sort of short-term fix. But if things do work out, then potentially something more permanent could follow further down the line.
Yeah, you mentioned as well being a chartered accountant. In your own personal professional opinion, how much do you think that came into play when the decision was made to bring him in as acting chief exec?
I think it obviously helps. I think Pools obviously operate, like most clubs in non-league football, operate on a significant loss in for Raj Singh in particular. Yeah. So when you've managed to cut the losses in the sort of drastic fashion Pools have, you want to try and steady the ship as best you can. And if you have someone who has a professional working knowledge of finances and things like that, it can't do any harm, put it that way.
I know you mentioned the chairman there. I was reading the statement that he released, obviously, after the appointment of Martin Jesper. And he said his expertise is ideally placed to help the club through the challenges ahead. Now, are these challenges simply referring to the coronavirus pandemic and the impact of it? Or are there plenty of other issues behind the scenes at Pools?
To be fair, I think credit to Raj Singh. He has steadied the ship. He has helped clean things up to a degree. I think he's maybe acted quite brutally or businessman-like, as he'd probably put it, in getting rid of certain staff members and things like that. But I don't think there's anything sinister going on, if that's what you're suggesting. I think it's purely the club has to keep existing, and sure, given how difficult the current situation is, drastic times call for drastic measures.
Sure. Nothing sinister from myself. I mean, not half as sinister as watching Olly Bernard spin round the screen that I've been doing for the past 10 or 15 seconds or so. It's giving me motion sickness over here. You in that background, Olly. Just very, very quickly, Dom, I kind of want to talk about something that I heard from Craig Hignett about a year or two ago now, and he mentioned of Pools, or he suggested that Pools could move to a kind of a full-time, part-time hybrid to be able to almost reset and challenge again. What were your thoughts on that at the time? And, is there ever any chance of that happening at Hartlepool, do you think, under Raj Singh?
Yeah, I think when it came out a couple of years ago, as you say, it was certainly an interesting idea. You see the number of quality part-time teams in the region. When you look at Blythe Spartans, Darlow, Spenny, they've managed to achieve relative success with a part-time model, albeit in the league below. So if you can, there's some top quality part-time players in the region, if you can sort of pick the best of them and then combine that with a full-time model, then sort of on paper that sounds like a recipe for success. But I think realistically, under Raj Singh, I think since then, speaking to Mark Maguire while he was still in the role, and then speaking to Raj Singh as well, I think that has sort of been put on the back burner, and I think the sort of main goal is to keep Pools as a full-time outfit. And I think, given they've spent pretty much the entire history as that it makes sense. If I think Mark Maguire said something quite interesting, where it was basically if a person wants to play part-time football, then fair play to them, but the full-time players are the ones ultimately with the ambition to go higher, and that's what Pools want to do. So it makes sense to stay full-time in that respect.
Pretty damning. Just very, very finally, Dom, before we let you head off and enjoy your Monday evening, because certainly being on Football Matters isn't conducive to that. How do you see a Hartlepool post-COVID-19 looking? Of course, everything is very up in the air. Everything is, very, very difficult to predict at the minute in all areas of society, let alone football. But how would you see, under Raj Singh's stewardship and now Martin Jesper as chief executive, how would you see Hartlepool looking?
As you say, that's
$1 million question.
Almost impossible to answer, but I will speculate. I think Martin Jesper, his appointment sort of speaks volumes. His reputation or previous experience working with supporter groups, and the fact fans have sort of increasingly over the past month or so got more and more involved. The club have spoken to the Supporters Trust, fans themselves have started raising money as a budget booster. I think they've raised over £17,000, which is obviously a great gesture, but in the grand scheme of things, wouldn't even get you a player in today's standards. So I think hopefully with Martin Jesper on board, he can get the fans more involved, maybe as shareholders, as sort of thinking bigger, more like in the direction a club I know well, Gateshead, how they've managed to get the fans involved as a key sort of part owners of the club. If they can try and go down that route, then Raj Singh's sort of financial burden and commitments become less sort of troublesome for him, and the club's long-term future sort of has a clearer and less sort of worrying picture.
Not fancy seeing a Saudi Arabian public investment fund coming to help out, no?
No. I'm sure Pools fans would take it, but
there's one kick.
There's one kicking about. We don't know if they are, Darren. That's the problem, isn't it? We don't know what's happening. Listen, Dom, thank you very, very much for your time tonight, mate. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being patient with us as well while we kept you waiting before. But take care of yourself, and we hope to see you soon once this whole lockdown business is all done and dusted.
No worries. Pleasure.
Top man. Thank you very much, Dom. See you later.
Bye.
Dominic Scurr, of course, right for Hartlepool. Mark, I need to come to you just before we do sprint on to the finish. Everything that you've heard from Dom there with regards to Hartlepool, firstly, does that allay to what you've heard with regards to the club? Second of all, how do you kind of see it going under this? And I have to say, because I don't know the man at all, but from his experience, he sounds a bit like a saver to me, Martin Jesper. How do you see it going under him second?
Well, firstly, what I'd say is I'd bound down to Dom in terms of his supposed knowledge of Hartlepool United Football Club.
Should have said that when he was on.
I don't like to praise Dom too much. But, no, I think, Hartlepool, they are a football league club. Darren and Olly will have had experience of Hartlepool United. They are a football league club and everything but status for me. You go to Victoria Park and it's just it's a football league ground. Sadly, they've slipped out the football league. Things need the ship steadied. They need to get themselves back on their feet. That isn't a short-term measure. You see the amount of clubs that have been relegated from the football league into the National League, and they get marooned in there. And I think what you've seen over the last 2 years at Pools is maybe the start of that process of rebuilding themselves and slowly getting back up on their feet again. But to that extent, the coronavirus epidemic's probably come at the wrong time for them. As things were starting to progress, as they were getting a few little gems through that they've sold on, the likes of Peter Kioso obviously has been sold on to Luton. That's helped them financially. When you're asking how it's going to look after this, I don't think there's a football club in the country where you could say how they're going to look after COVID-19, and that goes from the very top to the very bottom. So it's a difficult one to answer, as Dom said.
Yeah.
What I will say with Pools is I think we shouldn't underestimate the impact of the supporters. They are still getting immense crowds for the level that they're at.
Yeah.
and the supporter shouldn't underestimate their influence on the club. So every penny's going to count. So, you know, I know Dom said there, the 17,000 that's been raised, every penny of that will be made to count for the club. So it is a case of just sticking together and hopefully not, you know, safely navigating their way through COVID-19 and keeping that momentum that they had before this, keeping that going afterwards.
Well, we're heading into injury time for sure anyway, and there's another budget booster on our bit of any other business coming up very, very shortly. But it wouldn't be a Football Matters episode in 2020 without talking about the Newcastle takeover very quickly. And it is very, very quick on this one. Guess what? Sorry, Darren.
All right.
You can go and get another bud, mate. Other beers are available if on the market. I promise you, mate, this is very, very quick. And that is to simply say the takeover has not been done. As of yet,
but it's happening.
But oh, Olly, you're incorrigible. You are. I just have to talk about these fresh doubts.
It's Tuesday.
It's Is it, Olly? Tuesday this week? No, Wednesday.
For me, it's better on a Tuesday. So
Yeah.
it's like fish and chips on a Friday. You know, it's a day that's for business. It's a day, you know, dedicated for business. So it's going to happen on Tuesday. Tuesday
suits you better. Excellent. Well, there's been fresh doubts over it again. Well, there is every single week, isn't it? After the Premier League CEO Richard Masters sent a letter to the fiancée of the murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi, saying they'd taken her concerns into account over the proposed takeover by the Public Investment Fund. Now, as a result, meltdown on social media amongst Newcastle United fans. Olly, are these serious doubts? Are these well-founded doubts of the takeover or not, in your view?
Do you know where weeks ago I was confident that the takeover was going to take place? Now, you know, it feels more like another hiccups. Which is quite painful to say, but now the more we're waiting, the more I feel like it's running away from us.
You think?
Yeah. I mean it's done, but there's that many jealousy over it that I feel like, you know, if clubs are getting together to make sure that you know, it doesn't go through that.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll get it. That's how I feel at the minute. I think like everybody is trying his best to make sure that they can't afford to take the club on.
So you're still confident it'll go through, but you're less confident that you were.
But it feels like it has gone through. It's just people objecting, you know, to the FA. So and they need to be heard. If there's an objection, you need to be heard. And I think there's that many clubs that now it feels like a petition more than not.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there'll be more chat about it next week.
It's coming. Don't worry, it's coming.
In fairness to you, Olly, you have maintained that stance all the way through. So I would never go against you on any front. So I won't on this one. Let's move on very, very quickly from a Newcastle United takeover, travelling up the speed of it, presumably, into the final part of this week's show. Any other business? Lots to get through. Well, lots very, very quickly to get through. And let's start over at Hebburn, one of many clubs who have been doing their bits in the community during COVID-19. They are at it with schools this time, Mark, aren't they?
Yeah, not just schools. So they have donated 200 season tickets to local primary and secondary schools. And they're also donating a number to the Heaven Helps charity. So anyone in Heaven that uses the charity can get a season ticket or use it for a game, I think. So credit to Heaven. They have been one of the clubs that have come through this really well and are really playing their part in the local community.
So Durham season tickets to be handed out around Durham primary and secondary schools shortly, Olly, or not?
Got mine.
It's already done. Did you not know?
I didn't, babe. That's what this programme's for, breaking news.
We'll make sure that it happens as well. Somebody's gonna.
Your phone's going to go crazy in the next 2 minutes.
You forced me to say things that I don't want to say, but I said it. Yeah, it's free fibre kit. Come on.
Darren, would you go and see Durham for the season if you were handed a season ticket?
No, I said it's free. It's free for kids. It's free for kids.
Darren will be there first. Right, okay. Say again, Matt.
I've got 7 kids.
Okay, you can get it for free then.
Just 7 games. Then after that, it ends, unfortunately. From Hebburn, we go across to Whitley to Whitby. Darren, I'm going to come to you in a second on this. Plenty of activity over at Whitley Bay. And we're going to start with a departure to Whitby Town, Mark. What's been going on there?
Yeah, James Martin, former Hartlepool United left back, or left wing back, has signed for Whitby. He's gone down there to step up the levels again, and it'll be a good test for him. But I think Darren will attest he couldn't be at a better club down there.
I was going to ask exactly that question. So far away, Darren. This is why I like this part of the show, because I can just sit back and relax.
Yeah, I think great addition. To be quite honest, very knowledgeable with players in the area. Knows the level or around the levels really well. And I'm sure it'll be a great addition. Obviously Whitby have had a change of hands since obviously I was managing there. They had guys come in and take over the club who were, are looking to do and move things forward. Because I think for a long time, the club stood quite still. And as much as, myself when I was in charge for 4 years, tried to push it on as much as I could, unfortunately, the chairman would hold back on the reins and wanted everything to stay the same. And, but as we know, in football nowadays, you can't stand still. You've got to keep moving forward. And, with the guys coming in and taking over the club, and obviously, and with the new additions that have been brought in, I'm sure the club will move forward because it is a fantastic club, and it's got really good support. But unfortunately, that's been lost over the past so many years.
I'll tell you one club that is moving forward, and that's Darlington. We mentioned boost the budget before, but I still can't get quite over the sheer scale that Darlington have gone with and their fans. It's been a blinding success, I think it's fair to say, and it has now finished. How much are we talking, Mark, from Darlington?
£130,000 it finished on. I think, and forgive me if I'm incorrect here, but I'm fairly certain over the last 7 years, the supporters have raised £1.7 million for the club, which is just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal for a club, that have had to rebuild themselves. We talk about clubs that have been demoted. They are one that were incorrectly demoted, in my opinion. They're essential to that club and to where it's going. Alan Armstrong, they've got a manager that will, again, we talk about looking after every penny. He will certainly do that, and Darlington's certainly a club on the up.
So as owner and a former manager of lower league clubs, Darren and Olly, we're talking 131,000. Where's that going, that money, do you think, from a Darlington perspective?
Straight into the budget.
Yeah, well,
Durham are a well-run club, aren't they?
I think you've got to put quite a bit on the field. I think Darlington have an idea of where they want to be at, but again, it's got to be done sensibly. Do you know what I mean? You can't just go out and think we've got 100 and odd grand or whatever it is. We'll go and get him, because I'm sure Alan and Daz Holloway will be shrewd in what they do. And the players get in, and they'll only get players that they think will fit in, and not players for this for the fact that they might have been at a high level, because it doesn't always work out when you get players from a high level coming into dropping down at a lower level. So I think they'll be very shrewd in the market. They'll be very good with the money, but they'll essentially whatever they bring in, they'll add quality to the squad.
Well, it's uncertain, but it's exciting times for Darlington. A couple of final bits of news. Olly, I'm going to come to you. Well, you're going to round this off with a bit of chat about Durham. But before you do, Scott Barrow leaving Gateshead, Mark.
Yeah, bit of a surprise, I think. Fan favourite over the last 3 years since he's been for the last 2. But as the club statement said, couldn't agree terms for next season by all accounts. He'll be a miss. He'll be a loss. He was a big part of what happened last summer when the club pulled back from the brink. And now Mike Williamson's got to bring a replacement in, which I'm sure he's working hard at. And we'll see what the coming days brings.
We will indeed. And to round the show off very, very nicely, Durham, a new partner for Durham City, Olly. Talk to us about this one.
Who?
Never ceases to amaze me, your knowledge of your own.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
It's all right to kick it out. I'm going with, mate. That's what it says in my notes. You just keep me on my toes, that's all.
No, I like that. No, it was a partnership that started with Didier Agathe, who obviously is a member of.
Yeah.
And he wanted to use the charity for it.
Yeah.
So both charities should be Show Racing Red Card and Kick It Out should be on the sleeves this season.
Fantastic. I was going to ask about that actually, and wonder how Kick It Out would work with Show Races and Red Card. When of course
we have been working for many years. Over the last 4 years, we do joint club events. We do a lot of things. We Kick It Out because they're more into the Premier League, and we specialise in education. Yeah. So even though we both working against racism, we both do it in a very different way.
It's tremendous to see a united front, and excellent to see both organisations involved with Durham City as well. And that does, like I say, round us off very, very nicely indeed. We are pretty much done and out of time. Well, we're out of time every single week. That matters very, very little, doesn't it? For those wondering why there's no Team of the Week this time around, we have changed things up a little bit because mainly our producer got sick of us being about 20-25 minutes over time. We're bringing in a different challenge to these three every single week, but it's going to be a separate segment to this show. So this show is going to be released Monday evening, and we're going to be releasing this separate segments, probably about 10-15 minutes or so, probably about midweek, I would have said, but we'll decide on that one. Keep your eyes out for this one, because this week it is Room 101. What would our pundits want abolished from football, and why? I can imagine there's going to be some very, very impassioned answers going on here. So keep your eyes out on our social media channels for that, and do give us a watch. Mark, quiz, definitely on Thursday this week, is it?
Yeah, technical hitch on one.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah, me not realising what day it was, for example. But anyway, moving on. Yes, so this week is going to be the Price is Right sort of thing and transfer fees. So there'll be a transfer fee on the first question, and then the next question will be if the transfer fee was higher than the one in the previous question. So in my head it works. Hopefully it'll work on the quiz on Thursday.
And you're adopting the rule of Bruce Forsyth, are you?
Well, something like that. So yes, Thursday, 8 o'clock on Thursday.
Thursday at 8 o'clock. We look forward to it, and I'm pretty sure I can back you up on that one. I forgot what day of the week it was. If it wasn't Football Matters, I wouldn't have a clue at all what day of the week it was. So we'll let you off for 1 week, mate. We are rounding things off right now. Thanks as ever to our guests, of course, to Jed Grebby and to Dominic Scurr as well. Thanks to you three. Of course, I'll see you in about 5 minutes' time as we record this Room 101 segment. But everyone else will be seeing you in 7 days' time. And we're going to leave you watching us by quoting Shaka Hislop this week. We feel it's right. We feel it's apt. We all have a place in shaping what the new normal looks like. Let's all play our parts, because football matters, but Black Lives Matter even more. From all of us here at Football Matters, educate yourselves, learn, understand. We will see you in 7 days' time. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye for now.